If you've always wanted to try painting a lion, but just feel like it might be too hard, don't be intimidated. Just by applying some brush strokes as wild and crazy as the mane itself, and by adding those key details like those black rims around the eyes, it's pretty easy to create something as distinctive as a lion. I'll walk you through my process for painting this beautiful animal. I'll be using Arch's 140-pound cold-pressed cotton watercolor paper, an assortment of watercolors by Daniel Smith, Holbein, Winsor & Newton, and Core, and a few different round brushes, and also a 3/4 inch flat wash brush. And of course, I'll be using some staples like a water jar and some paper towel. I start by spraying my paints just to activate them so that they're nice and wet and ready to go. And using my 3/4 inch flat wash, I wet the paper all over. I love to start my paintings with the wet and wet technique because it allows me to apply thin layers of light colored paint that blends out really nicely on the first wash. So I'm grabbing some yellow ochre, and this is going to be the first color I use all over the painting. The only areas I'm carefully avoiding are areas underneath the eyes and around the muzzle that are going to be left white. I'm also dabbing in some brilliant colors right away. This is lemon yellow that I'm mixing in with my yellow ochre. I want my painting to be really vibrant and colorful, so I'm starting out with my base wash with a nice vibrant yellow color. I'm now taking some transparent orange while my paper and paint are still wet and just dropping that in the main area. And you can see I'm being rather sloppy with my brush strokes. I'm not applying any details just yet. I'm using several different reference photos for this and being rather approximate about where I put my colors. The important thing is just to try to get your colors close to what you see in the photographs. Usually this will involve oranges and yellows and tan colors for a lion. The most distinctive area on a lion, of course, is the eyes. So I want to make sure that I do those accurately and with the most detail in the whole painting. But while I'm still doing this base layer, I'm applying some ultramarine blue just to add some pops of cool colors inside the white areas of the lion, underneath the eyes and around the nose and on the muzzle. I love to have color variety in my paintings, and I think using a mixture of both warm and cool colors can really add so much beauty to your painting. I'm already beginning to indicate some of the dark areas that are going to go around the eyes. I'm using burnt umber for this color and just starting to suggest maybe some of the fur texture around the mane. You can see my pencil sketch was very light. I always like to start with a very light sketch so that when I apply the paint, it'll cover the pencil up completely. For the eyes, I'm wetting the paper inside of the eye first and then applying some yellow ochre and burnt umber. A lion's eyes are really quite yellow and they have reddish rims around the edges, and so I'm using burnt sienna for those circular rims within the eye. I'm leaving the highlight mostly untouched. For the other eye, I'm approaching it just the same way, starting with yellow ochre and then using burnt sienna and burnt umber to add those darker colors within the eye. I don't usually start with the eyes on an animal painting, but because the eyes are so important and distinctive on a lion, I'm painting these first. So I'm taking my black, or I'm using indigo actually for my black, and I'm painting those distinctive rims all the way around the eyes. This is where I'm painting very slowly and carefully. There's a tiny little pupil inside of the center of the eye, but I'm also leaving those highlights. And you can see instantly we have something that looks like a lion. For some of the fur texture around the eyes, I'm just taking my tiny size 2 round brush and just carefully painting some fur texture underneath those white areas in the fur. Now that the mane is dry, I can go back in with another layer, so I re-wet the whole area and then start dropping in some darker color. You can see it's starting to bleed and blend out and form almost this fuzzy furry texture all on its own with that wet and wet technique. So I'm alternating between burnt umber and transparent orange. There's a distinctive dark patch of fur between the eyes that I want to make sure that I include in my painting, so you can see me scrubbing that in. And I'm really just using fast, scrubby brush strokes all across the surface. The mane is something you don't have to be super careful about as long as you're mixing up your colors. Here I've got some Ultramarine to add some cool tints to the forehead of the lion, and then coming back in and just dabbing in, alternating between yellow ochre, transparent orange, burnt sienna, burnt umber. All of my earthy oranges and browns really serve me well for this painting. For this rather tan color on the side of the face, I'm using burnt sienna, watered down and mixed a little bit with yellow ochre. I'm darkening up with burnt umber and adding some yellow and orange to the nose. You can see I'm really just grabbing all different colors of paint and kind of blotting it on the nose. It's important to just observe the values in your reference photo. Make sure that you're including dark enough shadows and leaving highlights. This will help your painting look very realistic regardless of the colors that you choose to use. So you can go kind of wild and crazy with the colors here. You can use vibrant yellows and oranges and reds, and it will still look like a lion as long as you get your values correct. I'm throwing in some ultramarine blue hints here and there, and I think those look quite lovely. Scrubbing it on both sides, I want to make sure I have a nice color harmony all the way throughout the painting. And then for the area of the mane below the head, this is going to be the darkest section in the painting. So I'm scrubbing in ultramarine and burnt sienna and burnt umber and a whole variety of colors, just making sure my values are darker here, which means that my paint is more pure in pigment and not as watered down. I can slow down and paint with a little more texture and a little more detail as I get closer to the muzzle and to the mouth. And you can see by just using the quick scrubbing motion of my round brush, I can easily create that fur texture around the mouth without too much effort. And then you can go in and shade it and add some extra midtones and some more detail, again with just quick brush strokes. None of this footage is sped up. I'm just painting really fast and using short, quick brush strokes for that fur detail. There was a moment during this painting when I definitely wanted to give up on it because I thought it looked so ugly, but I'm glad I pushed through it. There's always going to be a time in the middle of your painting when you think, oh my goodness, what have I done? I've ruined it. So don't give up, just push through and it will come together in the end. So now I'm really slowing down and starting to add some more detail. I'm adding more layers of color. I'm even using little hints of phthalo blue, which is a bright, cool blue underneath and around the eyes and over the nose. And then I'm just intensifying some of those areas of brilliant orange above the eyes. You can see in the mane I added some blooms, which is just when you take droplets of water and touch those on the wet paint. And then I'm darkening up the mouth using indigo and burnt umber, which creates a nice black, and adding little hints of phthalo blue again around the mouth in the white areas. For the nose, I'm just taking my indigo and painting in all of those dark details. It really just requires a small brush and a steady hand for these details, and then I'm filling in the nose with alizarin crimson. While the paint is wet, I can use my tiny brush and pull the paint upward, creating those fur textures just above the nose. Using my size 2 round brush, I can paint all those little details like those little ridges along the muzzle and extra fur texture on the nose. I like to splay the tip of my round brush so that it separates the bristles and makes it easier to paint all of that texture. I'm just continuing to add more value and darkening up my oranges and my browns within those fur shapes, and just darkening up between the eyes, adding details, adding some more orange. I really don't think you can have too much orange when you're painting a lion, or yellow for that matter. I'm taking my large brush and just swiping on some more lemon yellow, and I love the look of these broad brush strokes over the top of all this detail. I'm doing the same thing now with my phthalo blue and just adding some key brush strokes here and there to add a pop of color and just a really fun look as far as texture and brush strokes. Just need to add some more detail on the muzzle and a few more hints of blue and orange to really bring some color and vibrancy to the painting. One more big brush stroke of orange on this side, and you can just smooth it out gently, and then while it's still wet, drop in some more dark shadows to darken up that area and maybe even it out. And now I'm adding the dots, those little details on the muzzle where the whiskers are growing from. Just using my transparent orange for that. Now I'm mixing up some opaque white gouache, and this is what I'm using to paint on the whiskers. You'll want to make sure that your painting is completely dry before you add these details. I'm using my tiny size 2 round brush and just making sure that my gouache is thick enough so that it will show up completely white and dry just the way that it looks when I put it down. If it's too watered down, it will dry darker and will look thin, and you'll probably need to go back and add another layer. There are a couple of black whiskers as well, so I paint those on in this final layer. So there is our finished magnificent King of the Jungle. You can see a painting like this can be accomplished with just some really fast, fun, broad brush strokes and just a few key details. So give it a shot, and if you decide to try this painting, I'd love to see what you're creating. Just tag me on Instagram and I'll check it out. Here are some videos you might be interested in. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.